Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the CEOs for being here. I know a few of you personally, and I admire all of you, but one of the things that I've expressed in private and also in public is my concern that the American political system is infecting the American financial system, and frankly, the American financial system is infecting the American political system. This is a graphic compiled by my staff which lists the ways in which your financial institutions have gotten involved in major political debates of the last few years. Things like the Georgia voter identification law, things like whether to lend to fossil fuel-based companies, things like guns and abortion. I should say, of course, that we all have our opinions on matters of public policy. Senator Cortez Masto and I disagree. But the difference between Senator Cortez Masto and I and all of you is that the people of our states elected us to do public policy. Nobody elected you, and so my counsel and my line of questioning is going to be very focused on this particular issue. Stay out of public policy unless it affects your core business interests, because if you don't, it's going to be a lot harder for us to see you guys as neutral arbiters and neutral actors in the American financial system. It's going to be much easier for us to see you as political actors. Now, I want to focus on a couple of issues just because I think they highlight the absurdity of this, and that will lead me to my questions. Georgia in 2021 passed an extraordinarily moderate voter identification law. 6 of the 8 of you immediately issued statements criticizing the state of Georgia to that effect, or at least your institutions issued statements to that effect. Now, I should point out that New York has a voter identification law, a much more stringent voter identification law than the state of Georgia. Did any of you issue statements criticizing the state of New York for their voter identification law? Show of hands. Let the record show that none of you criticized New York for a more stringent law, but you jumped into a culture war over Georgia. I can't possibly understand why. Something that's more concerning to me, because it affects my constituents in the state of Ohio, is a lot of your approach on energy policy. We have seen over the last 18 months the consequences of reducing American energy independence. It empowers very bad people all over the world. It also impoverishes and immiserates some of my constituents and destroys their job. I'm not picking on you, Mr. Moynihan. I think you're the only bank that has a red X on every single issue. This is true of most of you. But I'm going to ask you this question about energy policy. In 2015, Bank of America committed to cut off lending by 2025, that's just a couple years from now, to companies earning 25% or more of their revenue from thermal coal mining. Now, that decision and some other decisions that have been made are raising the price of energy on Ohio consumers and imperiling the jobs of those who work in the energy sector. Why are you doing this? Did the government make you do it? And if not, why are you doing it?
Senator Vance, just to be specific, that was a statement about mountaintop removal policy. I grew up in southern Ohio where it was called strip mining back then.
Sure.
My next door neighbor was engaged in the business. And the statement we made was we would not continue to fund people who would continue to take the tops off of the mountains in the Appalachian Mountains and turn them into mines. And that was based on our assessment of the risk at the time.
So you guys have taken a number of other energy policy decisions that raise the cost of energy in American consumers. You guys have committed to a net zero standard by which effectively there are no net zero carbon emissions, and you've held your clients to that standard, saying that they need to become aligned with net zero, and we plan to be the advisor of choice to our clients in this transition. So it's not just that particular decision, Mr. Moynihan, and again, it's not just Bank of America. My point here is pretty straightforward and simple, which is that whether we achieve net zero and when we achieve net zero is a debate for the elected representatives of the American people. What kind of voter identification law we have is a decision for the elected representatives of the American people. And every time you guys get involved in these culture war battles, it makes it harder for the American people to see you guys as neutral financial institutions, and it frankly makes it harder for us to do the same. So I will leave you with just this thought. You've heard some very good line of questioning on Basel III. I agree with Senator Hagerty about Basel III. I don't know what some of the regulators are talking about doing. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. Often, bank CEOs and other financial institutions will come to Republicans for more reasonable regulations, for lower taxes, to fight it back against things like Basel III. I guess my point is, if you guys are going to use the financial power that you've accumulated to go to war against the values of our voters, impoverish our constituents who rely on cheap energy, and destroy the jobs of people who work in the energy sector, why should we listen to you when you come and ask us for a tax break or for reasonable regulations? I'm one Republican who wants to have a good relationship with you, but the more you guys insult yourself into these fights, the less good that relationship will be. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Senator Vance. Senator